Previously, on One Night, Three Stories, Joe's story takes an interesting turn from past tense to present tense.
I knew Victor was getting annoyed that I wasn't turning off the TV, so I turned it off and he went to sleep. The next thing that I know, I hear the chime.
Now, it's time to analyse Victor's version of events. Watch this moment in Victor Zabrowski's interview. He keeps returning to the same idea again and again.
Went upstairs, took a shower. Dylan was in the shower when I got home. We were having trouble with our shower in our master bedroom.
Why those details? In this episode, we will follow every repeated point to see what he needs detectives and us to understand about the night Robert Wone was killed. Welcome to Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. If you're new here, what I do is strip away everything and then look at the words that are said by the people at the centre of the story. And then I'll use my process of statement investigation to give you the keys to seeing where the truth is, where deception could be happening, and also the motivations of the person talking as well. It's a process that I use with investigators, with corporate clients, and with the media to get a deep understanding of what is being said. And this is episode 2 of Robert Wone, One Night, Three Stories. Robert was murdered in 2006. He was spending the night with 3 people he knew. And we're going to listen to the 3 stories told by those people and look at the words as they speak to the police on the night that Robert was killed to see if we can get a deeper understanding of what happened. You see, the 3 people there deny any involvement in Robert's murder. They say an intruder must have broken into the house they shared and that person must have killed Robert. But do their stories hang together? Can we trust the words? We're going to dive into those words to see if we can get that understanding of what did happen, who did murder Robert Wone. We've already looked at Joe Price in episode 1. In this episode, we're going to look at Victor's police interview. We're going to compare what he says to some of the things we've already heard from Joe as well. And then at the very end of this series, we're going to finish up looking at the theories from looking across all 3 interviews to see if we can work out what happened. Do they leak? Do they give us any information? Can they point towards what happened to Robert Wone? You can also have a listen to the 911 call made by Victor, who we will be looking at, and compare what he says on the 911 call to what he says in this police interview. You can delve into the archives of the channel to find that 911 call broken down there. And do share your theories. What do you hear in the words? What do you notice? What questions do you have? Let me know, and maybe you will find yourself in the very last episode of this series where we try and tie it all together and see what we can learn. So let's go into the police interview with Victor. And the first part is really interesting because he's going to be asked, tell us what happened, and where he starts his story is really, really interesting. See if you can notice where he starts that story and what is interesting about it. And also, there are a few themes, ideas, even words that he repeats over and over again. Those can be very instructive too.
Okay, can you just go ahead and tell me what you remember about what happened tonight?
Well, it was, I had just gotten back from a business trip. I was in Denver and got home around 6:30. When I got home, Dylan was home. He was exercising in his room, and he had told me that Joe was at the gym. So I changed clothes, unpacked a bit, and then went to the gym. I got home probably only about 35 minutes later. It wasn't long. So probably 7:15, 7:20. Went upstairs, took a shower. Joe was already home from the gym. And Dylan was in the shower when I got home. And then I went upstairs, changed. We were having trouble with our shower in our master bedroom, so Joe was trying to rig a hose to see if he could make it leak again into the drain. And I went downstairs. Dylan had already started cooking dinner. I helped. We were having steak, so we were in and out the back door. And while we were cooking dinner, I talked to a friend of mine, lives in Silver Spring, and steaks were burning, so we went out there, got off the phone, we had dinner. We finished dinner. I don't know exactly what time. I'm guessing it was around 9:30. It was probably earlier than that because it was probably like 9:15 or so. Because we finished cleaning the kitchen. Just as we were finishing dinner, Joe remembered he had left the water running, and so he went up, and evidently it was dripping again, so he had to clean up the leak. Dylan and I went upstairs. Dylan went in his room. I went upstairs the rest of the way, talked to Joe, and that's when I went and watered the plants. I watered the ones on the roof first, and then I went downstairs all the way down to the main level and went out front and watered the front flowers.
Did you spot those repeated concepts there when Victor was talking? He's asked though, okay, can you just go ahead and tell me what you remember about what happened tonight? This is the night that Robert Wone was murdered. And where Victor starts his story is long before Robert enters the scene. In fact, it's going to be 7 minutes worth of talking that Victor does before he mentions the murder of Robert Wone. It's an incredibly long and detailed answer. When we looked at Joe and he said, I'll tell you what I remember. And he set out some scenes, first of all, but this timeline of his story started at when Robert arrived at the house. However, Victor starts much, much earlier. In fact, when he gets home, when I just got home from a business trip, I was in Denver, got home around 6:30. Dylan was home, he was exercising in his room, and he told me that Joe was at the gym. So I changed clothes, unpacked a bit, and then went to the gym. Now, why does he start there? Well, it could be that he is starting to sell some alibis and do some scene setting and so on, because the very first thing he mentions is the guys were sweaty. Do you remember the sticky comment about Robert earlier in Joe's interview where, Robert said he was going to have a shower because he was sticky? Well, here we have the three guys exercising. Dylan was exercising in his room. Joe was at the gym. I changed my clothes and went to the gym. All reasons, exercising, working out, going to the gym, to have a shower, to clean up, which is what he talks a lot about at the very beginning of his answer. I probably got home only about 35 minutes later. Really long trip to the gym. It wasn't long, so probably 7:15, 7:20. He says, went upstairs, took a shower. Now, we've got a lot going on here in just those 5 words. Went upstairs, took a shower. We have another repeated concept. He doesn't just mention showers a lot and cleanliness, as we will see, but he also mentions the floors of the house a lot when he talks, Victor. So went upstairs, it's his first kind of mention of that. He went upstairs, took a shower. You'll notice he doesn't say, I went upstairs and I took a shower. He takes himself out of this. He doesn't actually say who went upstairs or who took a shower. It's just a little bit more distant. Went upstairs, took a shower. Joe was already home from the gym and Dylan was in the shower. So we've got now the shower for Victor, the shower for Dylan when I got home. And then I went upstairs, changed. So we've got 2 going upstairs from him. He went upstairs twice. He doesn't talk about coming downstairs in between. He just wants to say twice he was upstairs, changed. And then he talks about some trouble with the shower as well. We were having trouble with our shower in the master bedroom. So Joe was trying to rig a hose to see if he could make it leak again into the drain. So we've got this repeated mention of showers. We've got mentions of hoses. Water again, leak again into the drain where you get rid of unclean things down the drain. He mentions showers, the need to clean, and water a lot in this very opening part of what he is saying. And then he talks about movement again. And then I went downstairs. Dylan had already started cooking dinner. I helped. We were having steak. So we were in and out the back door. Now we'll know the back door is very important to these guys. It's their story. It's how the intruder got in was through the unlocked back door. So is this all incidental stuff that he's just telling this story from 6:30, or is this when the story starts in his head that he has to tell from 6:30? Because if he talks about showers and he talks about the back door being open and closed and then, no one paying a lot of attention to the back door, it's all very casual. This is scene setting that he is doing. I think it could be that. We were having steak, so we were in and out the back door. I'm guessing they cooked this steak outside. Possible. while we were cooking dinner. I talked to a friend of mine who lives in Silver Spring and the steaks were burning, so I went out there, another mention of going out the back door, got off the phone. Also, maybe absent-mindedly on the phone while I was going through the back door, so I didn't think to lock it because I was doing something else. So went out there, got off the phone, we had dinner. We finished dinner. I don't know exactly what time. I'm guessing it was around 9:30. And this is something else that he does is very, wants to be very precise about times, but is actually vague. It was probably earlier than that because it was probably like 9:15 or so because we finished cleaning the kitchen. Another mention of cleaning up. This is all, to me, very possibly scene setting to say that if you find some stuff clean in this house, these are the reasons why. We all went to the gym and had showers, and then we had dinner, and we were cleaning. We finished cleaning the kitchen. Just as we were finishing dinner, Joe remembered he had left the water running again. Another mention of water. So he went up, another mention of floors of the house. Evidently, it was dripping again. Another water mention. So he had to clean up the leak. So another mention of cleaning. Water cleaning, very, very frequently mentioned by Victor at the start of this. Dylan and I went upstairs. Another movement in the house. Dylan went in his room. I went upstairs. The rest of the way, I talked to Joe. So this was a townhouse. So I think going up 2 flights of stairs, entirely possible. And that's when I went out and watered the plants. So that's when I went and watered the plants. Water again. I watered the ones on the roof first, and then I went downstairs, another movement through the house, all the way down, more movement to the main level, and went out front and watered the front flowers. So we have that repeated concept of cleanliness and water. So look, number one, why is he starting the story here? I want to know why he's starting the story here. Why does he not start with hearing the screams, the chimes, all the shocking things of the night? Instead, we get this scene setting. Starting the story as soon as he came back from his business trip. Repeated mentions of water and cleaning. I hope you spotted them. Keep an ear out to see if there are any more. And also this repeated movement between the floors. So let's listen to the next part of Victor talking now. He's still in this story. You will not hear Robert mentioned for a while. So what I want you to do here is have a listen. Keep an eye out for a new repeated idea that he has. He may have the other repeated ideas going forward, but something new comes to his mind there as well. And watch for jumps in time. That's when either something skips forward and we jump over something that maybe he doesn't want to mention, or he goes backward in time in order to make the next thing he says make sense. He realizes he has to fill in some blanks. Let's listen to what Victor has to say next.
I came back in and went right upstairs to our bedroom, which is on the 3rd floor. By that time, it was probably like 10:15 or 10 till 10, something like that. We were at dinner. We were talking about how we wanted to watch a show called Project Runway, and so I went upstairs, started turning the television on and flipping channels, getting ready for bed, and I couldn't find the station. Joe came up because he was still working with the drain, and told me what station it was on. We clicked over to it, and we found out we didn't have that station any longer because he had canceled part of the cable. So he went downstairs at that point, and I just was flipping channels, watching some other shows, and then he came up probably about 10 or 15 minutes later and said, try it again. So we went, and the show was on. So we were both watching the show, and the phone rang, and it was Robert. I had missed, because I had come down before then. I had come downstairs. Actually, it was probably when I was coming up the stairs after watering the plants out front. It's when I saw Dylan making the bed in the office. And I asked him what he was doing, because I didn't know we were having anyone come over. And he said that Robert was coming over, that he was working late and wanted to just crash at our place rather than going home. And then I talked to Joe, and I asked Joe, and he said yes, that's what it was. Robert was coming over, and that they were going to have breakfast in the morning. So at that point is when I finished going upstairs and started watching TV. So we're watching the Project Runway show, and the phone rings, and it's Robert, and he says that he's on his way. he was talking to Joe. I'm just hearing this half of the conversation. And Joe told him to just ring the doorbell when he got there. So he hung up. The call was only like a minute. I mean, it was a very short call. And Joe and I were watching TV then for a few minutes.
We have some strange old word in there from Victor. I came back in, he starts, and went right upstairs to our bedroom, which is on the 3rd floor. More movement and explanation of movement through this house. By that time, it was probably like 10:15 or 10:10, something like that. Again, this need, and this is the repeated concept I really see here, is timings. He really wants to tie things down to precise times, but doesn't have precise times. Also, duration's very important to him, as we'll see as we go through. Something like that. We were at dinner, we were talking about how we wanted to watch a show called Project Runway. And so I went upstairs, started turning the television on and flipping the channels, getting ready for bed, and couldn't find the station. Now, we've got a jumping timeline there where he says about going to bed, but then he has to jump back to talking about Project Runway at dinner for what he's about to say next, making sense. Why is that? And why do we have all this unneeded action? Robert has been stabbed inside your house, and yet we hear about him going upstairs long before Robert arrives and turning on the television, flipping the channels, getting ready for bed, couldn't find the station. None of this should be relevant to the fact that someone you know was murdered in your house tonight. Started turning the television on is an interesting one. It's 2006 this happened. It's not like, the 1960s when you had to turn the television on half an hour before you wanted to watch it so that it could warm up. Yeah, kids, that really did happen. 2006, you press a button, your television is on. Started turning the television on. This strikes me as way too much detail. Also, the fact they couldn't find the station. Joe came up because he was still working with the drain. And told me what station it was on. We clicked over to it, but working with the drain, by the way, still cleaning, found out we didn't have that station any longer because he had cancelled part of the cable. So he went downstairs at that point, and I was just flipping channels, watching some other shows, and then he came up. Again, we've got a duration, probably about 10 or 15 minutes later, and said, try again. So he went, and the show was on. So we were both watching the show, and the phone rang. Now, this whole fact that they didn't have the channel that Project Runway was on is completely irrelevant unless it explains Joe going downstairs for a while when Victor isn't there. Now, just think about how that would happen in your life. You're in bed, you try to watch a channel, it's been cancelled. And someone decides that they're going to go and get that channel. Would they not say to you, I'll just go downstairs to the computer, re-get that part of the package so that we'll have the channel to watch Project Runway. I really want to watch this, so that I'll go and do that. That's most likely what would happen, but here, no, Joe just disappears and goes downstairs for this amount of time, this 10 to 15 minutes, and then comes back up again and says, try the channel. We were both watching the show and the phone rang. It was Robert. Now, this phone call from Robert has been mentioned by Joe as well, now being mentioned by Victor. So why did he mention that? Why did they both have this memory of that phone call? I missed because I come down before them. I come downstairs. Actually, it was probably when I was coming upstairs. Is it really important whether you're going upstairs or downstairs? But he's jumping backwards in time again. We can see that to make things make sense. Actually, it was probably when I was coming upstairs after watering the plants out front is where I saw Dylan making the bed in the office. And I asked him what he was doing because I didn't know we were having anyone come over. Have you spotted that Joe is the dominant person in this house? Joe cancelled the cable. Joe's friend is coming over, Robert, and yet it was Dylan that was making the bed. And also Joe's partner, Victor, did not know Robert was coming over. The first he found out about it is when he saw Dylan making the bed. So we can get from that Joe is the dominant person inside this house. And he said that Robert was coming over, that he was working late, and he wanted to just crash at our place. All of them in their interviews, Joe we've seen so far, and now Victor, want to give this reason why Robert was coming over. It's not enough for them to say Robert was staying at our house tonight. They all want to join the reason to it. And he's got that word just in there, which is an interesting word. It sometimes indicates deception. Just crash at our place. Nothing else was going on. I just want you to know that he was just crashing at our place. I'm going to narrow it down with that word just. There may have been a lot of reasons for it, but I just want you to know he just wanted to crash at our place rather than going home. And then I talked to Joe, and I asked Joe, and he said, yes, that's what it was. Robert was coming over. Now, why that need? Why that need to talk to Joe about it and tell us you talked to Joe about it? Surely, if Robert was coming over and it was all cool, then that's great. Robert's coming over, says Dylan, I'm making the bed for Robert. Oh, great. Then I talked to Joe and I asked Joe, and he said, yes, that's what it was. Robert was coming over. Was there some tension about Robert coming over? Did Victor not like the fact that Robert was coming over? Remember in Joe's one, he said that he wasn't worried that the tenant would have a cow about Robert staying over. And I said, why would someone staying over cause stress inside this house? Why does that thought enter Joe's head? And here again, I think that Victor wasn't 100% happy that someone was staying over and that they were going to have breakfast in the morning. Another repeated point from Joe's story. So at that point is when I finished going upstairs and started watching TV. At that point when I finished going upstairs. When we've got the upstairs thing again, which Victor is very big on. But finished going upstairs is this for him to say, look, no matter what else I'm going to tell you, that was the point where I was in the bedroom and I did not move from the bedroom until we heard that Robert had been attacked. Started watching TV, started watching the Runway Project show, and the phone rings and it's Robert. And he says he's on his way, that he was talking to Joe. I'm just hearing half the conversation. Joe told him just to ring the doorbell when he got there. So he hung up. The call was like only a minute. So we have this repeated idea here that he wants to tell us how long things asked. Why would that be? Let me put something to you. If you have to make up an entire timeline, then it really works if you think, how long did this take? How long did this take? How long did this take? So that you know how long it took, so you know how much time you have to fill. I mean, it was a very short call. Irrelevant. Victor, this guy has been stabbed at your house. The length of the call is really irrelevant. But you want to tell us it was only a minute. It was a very short call. And Joe and I were watching TV then for a few minutes. He wants to make sure this is all seen as being very short. Why? So in this part here, that real focus on the timings, but it is vague timings. He wants to give the impression he's been trying to be uber accurate. But he's not. He's not being uber accurate. So look, Robert coming over does seem like a big deal in this house to me. The source of tension for some reason. And Joe is the dominant person inside this house. We're going to get some more now from Robert talking to the police here. I want you to look at where his focus is. What is it that he's focused on when he's talking? And also, look for double actions. When people are telling deceptive stories, they might often say they did something twice. Like, I went in through the front door, saw that person was there, and went, So I went through the front door, and they'll mention the things twice. You'll see one of those and hear one of those things from Victor's words here.
Then Joe went downstairs, and it turned out that he had come, and Dylan had let him in. And so I stayed upstairs. I was already undressed and ready for bed. Probably about 15 or 20 minutes later at the most, absolute most, Joe came back upstairs. I'm guessing it was probably like 10 till, something like that, because there's a lot of commercials in this program, and I think we watched 2 commercials. But it was the end of the show. I mean, it was sort of just the climax of the show, so I know he only saw the last few minutes. So then the show was over at 11. 11, we were still watching the same channel, and I got up and brushed my teeth, came back to bed, and Joe was switching channels, looking what was on, and he saw a show he wanted to see, and he was going to start watching it. We turned the lights out. When I went into the bathroom to brush my teeth, I also took a Sudafed and a Unisom, because I just got back from the trip and I was having postnasal drip, and I've been having trouble sleeping anyway because of work, been a lot of pressure, and then taking a Sudafed, which sometimes keep me up, I thought I should take something. So I took that. Now it's probably only like 5 minutes after 11, or 7 minutes after 11. It's pretty early still, and I just rolled over and went to bed. The lights were out. Joe still had the TV on, and like about 2 minutes later, he turned the TV off and went to bed himself. And then I woke up to screams. And Joe and I both jumped up out of bed and ran to the door. And when we got to the door, Joe went out and flipped the light on, and we heard another kind of low scream while we were at our doorway.
Let me talk about the construct of that first of all. I mean, some of the detail there, the medicines he took, why he took them, mind-numbingly boring. Could be that actually they're true, and these are things he feels really comfortable talking about because they're no stress. Yeah, I took some Sudafed or whatever, because he's getting towards the part where he's going to have to mention the murder of Robert Wone. And so therefore he might just be wallowing in the comfort of getting across all these minute details. Let's break it down word by word. What did I find interesting in that section there? So many concepts that we've seen before. Joe went downstairs. It turned out that he had come and Dylan had let him in. Now, I don't think in anyone's timeline, certainly not in Joe's, Dylan did let Robert in, but who alerted Joe that Robert was in? I don't really get a sense of that from their words. I don't think. Am I wrong? Let me know in the comments. So I stayed upstairs. Really important for Victor to say he's upstairs during all of this. He did not come downstairs. I was already undressed and ready for bed. I think you've told us that. Probably about 15 or 20 minutes later, at most, absolute most, Joe came back upstairs, again talking about durations. I'm guessing it was probably like 10 till, something like that, because there's a lot of commercials in this programme. And I think we watched 2 commercials, but it was the end of the show. I think we watched 2 commercials. Well, who's watching this programme? Because you're telling you were watching it with Joe, then he went downstairs, and then, I don't know, did he come back up and watch the commercials with you? Maybe he did, but you're just being really vague on the times. I mean, it was sort of just the climax of the show, so I know he only saw the last few minutes, and then the show was over at 11. At 11, we were still watching the same channel, and I went up, so he gets up twice. I went up, got up, and brushed my teeth, came back to bed, and Joe was switching channels, looking what was on. And he saw a show he wanted to see, and he was going to start watching it. We turned the lights out. I went into the bathroom to brush my teeth. You already did brush your teeth. You told us that we were watching the same channel. I went up, got up and brushed my teeth, came back to bed. I went when I got to the bathroom, brushed my teeth. I also took a Sudafed and a Unison because I just got back from the trip and I was having postnasal drip and I've been having trouble sleeping anyway because of work. There's a lot of pressure. And then taking a Sudafed would sometimes keep me up. I thought I should take something. So I took that. It's probably only like 5 minutes after 11, 7 minutes after 11. It's pretty early still. And I just rolled over and went to bed. The lights were out. Joe still had the TV on. We got going to bed, going to sleep. I mean, he was in bed and then he says he went to bed. Would you say I went to bed and then I went to sleep? The 2 different actions to me. Maybe I misspeak. Maybe, again, this is not really what happened. And like about 2 minutes later, he turned the TV off and went to bed himself. Now, this section here is consistent almost to the minute with Joe's account there. Now, that might be a good thing, or it might be the fact that the really detailed storytelling going on here, although Victor is way more detailed than Joe in telling this story. Also, you remember Joe said that Victor was getting annoyed because he was watching TV. Victor doesn't mention any annoyance whatsoever. 7 minutes into the answer, we've listened to 7 minutes of him talking of what happened. He mentions Robert. And then we woke up. I woke up to screams, is what he says. Pronouns are interesting here. And then we woke up. So that's the 2 of them woke up. I woke up to screams. Not we woke up to screams. We woke up. I woke up to screams. Also, woke up to screams, not woken by screams. Interesting language there. And Joe and I both jumped out of bed and ran to the door. Now, it's not we, it's Joe and I. We's very close. We did things together. Joe and I both jumped out of bed. Suggests a lack of closeness, a little bit of distance there, referring to them as Joe and I, and ran to the door. And when we got to the door, Joe went out and flipped the light on, and we heard another kind of low scream while we were there at our doorway. Now, he's very clear here that it's screams. We woke up, I woke up to screams. We both jumped out of bed, got to the door, flipped the light on, and we heard another kind of low scream, is what he says. Joe didn't call them screams at all. He said it was yelling or grunts or something. Two people can refer to things in different ways, but certainly if there were screams, you'd know there were screams, and you wouldn't call them yelling or grunts or something. And if you heard grunts, would you call them screams? Interesting deviation there between the two stories. So here we have jumps in time. There he has to keep going back a lot to make the rest make sense and talk about all sorts of strange things, and there's a real focus on where people are. I'm up here. There's Joe now has gone downstairs twice in all the time that Victor is up there. What are you thinking so far? How are these words hanging together, especially in light of what Joe has said, or do you notice anything else in Victor's words? Let me know in the comments, and maybe we'll feature your comment in the last episode of the series where we try and tie together what we've learned from the 3 stories about the one night the night Robert Wone was murdered. Do you ever get that gut feeling that people are holding things back or not giving you the full story? I'm feeling it right now with these police interviews. You're not paranoid, you're being perceptive, because most people, they don't see the clues. They don't hear the clues hiding in plain sight. But listen, you don't have to. I will show you how to hear what's really being said or what's not being said as well. Subscribe to this channel. Make sure you get the next episodes in this series and other cases like this where we'll look at what's really being said by the people at the heart of the story. And I can break it down and help sharpen your instincts and change how you hear conversations forever. Also, if you know someone who would like to hear this, share it with them, recommend it to them, or just a press of the like button makes this get out to more people, which is exactly what I want to do. I want to upskill people to hear things better, to hear things clearer. If you know someone who keeps getting misled, this would be the perfect channel for them. Okay, let's go back into the police interview room now, hear more from Victor.
And we went running downstairs. Joe was right in front of me, and I looked in the room, and Robert was laying on the bed, kind of catty corner. And I started screaming. I mean, I was just hysterical. And Joe just told me to run upstairs. He goes, go back upstairs right now and dial 911. And he went over to Robert, and I went upstairs. And I called 911, and the operator picked up pretty quickly. And I told her that that I thought somebody had broken in the house, and that I thought somebody was injured, but I didn't at that time know what was happening. So I walked back while I'm on the phone with her to the top of our landing, top of our stairs, and I can see Joe, and Joe saying, get an ambulance here right away, Robert's hurt. So I repeated it and said we needed help right away. And she talked to me for a little bit, and then she told me Joe had said he was stabbed, and so
Joe said he was stabbed?
Yes, because when I was at the stairs, because I told her that he was stabbed on the phone, and she told me to apply pressure to the wound. So I grabbed a towel and I grabbed my robe and I went downstairs, and at that point Joe was already applying pressure to the wound. I gave him another towel, and when I was coming down the stairs, Dylan was in the doorway, and when I came, he'd backed up a bit and let me in, and I gave Joe the towel. I was still on the phone with the operator and was saying, we need help right away. Joe was like, what time is it? It's taking so long. And I asked the operator what time it was, and she said it was 11:43. And she said that earlier, and then again she said I had to go to the door to let the ambulance and the police in. And I said I didn't know if anyone was still in the house. So I went to the window and opened up the shutters because they were completely closed, and I looked down, I couldn't see anything or anybody, and I, was talking to her and saying we need help now, and then she said they're on their way, they'll be there any minute, and then I saw the ambulance pull up, and then I looked down the street and I saw a fire engine.
So this follows on from hearing the scream, and we went running downstairs. So we do have the jointness there. We do have the we when running downstairs. Joe was right in front of me and looked in the room, and Robert was laying on the bed and then there's some interference. I can't hear what it is. It sounds like Catty Corner or something like that. If you do know, let me know in the comments. You'll notice it different from Joe. Joe talks about seeing the door and seeing the door was open. Victor just says Joe was right in front of me and looked in the room, and Robert was laying on the bed in something. Why did they run to that room? Doesn't explain why they run to that room. I mean, if they ran down the stairs towards the noise or something like that, that would make a lot of sense, but that doesn't come out in the words. And I started screaming. Remember, Dylan not hearing the chime? I started screaming. Consistent, but I started screaming. I mean, I was just hysterical. And Joe told me to run upstairs. He tells me, go back upstairs right now and dial 911. And I went, and he went over to Robert, and I went upstairs and I called 911. So again, the urgency in calling 911, very important to get across. Joe just told me to run upstairs. He goes back, back upstairs right now. So that urgency, dead important for these guys to get across. And the operator picked up very quickly. Again, this all happened really quickly. And I told her that I thought somebody had broken in the house and that I thought somebody was injured. But I didn't at that time know what was happening. Now, we heard, if you've heard the 911 call, this is the very first thing that Victor says in the 911 call. Is not my friend, a guy I know has been stabbed inside the house and need an ambulance quickly. He says somebody has broken in the house. And then he talks about the injury. The most important thing for him to say is that someone is broken in the house, not that someone is injured, gravely injured. And it's the same thing here. It's the first thing he mentions is somebody has broken into the house and somebody was injured. Interesting, somebody, not my friend or the guy that's staying with us, just somebody was injured. But I didn't at that time know what was happening. Now, what does that mean? Why do you need to tell us you don't know what was happening? You think somebody's broken into the house. You know somebody's injured. You're also going to say later that you know that there's been a stabbing. So I don't know what was happening. What does that mean? So I walked back a while. I'm on the phone with her to the top of the landing, up our stairs. I couldn't see Joe. And Joe was saying, get an ambulance here right away. Robert's hurt. More making sure that it comes across how urgently they were acting. So I repeated it. And he said, we need help. Right away. Urgency again. She talked to me for a bit and then she told me Joe had said that he was stabbed and this is him jumping back again in time because at this point Joe hasn't said in his timeline that Robert has been stabbed. We don't even have a mention of a knife here that Joe said he found a knife. He has to go back in time again to make the next thing make sense. So I repeated and said we need help right away. She talked to me for a little bit and then she told me and it's going to be, she told me to apply pressure to the wound with towels, but he needs to make it make sense. Joe had said he was stabbed and, Joe said he was stabbed, says the detective. Yes, because when I was at the stairs, says Victor, doesn't make any sense because his story's not hanging together now. Because I told her that he was stabbed on the phone and she told me to apply pressure to the wound. So I grabbed the towel and I grabbed my robe. Robe bingo there. The fact he's wearing a robe is made very clear. Again, utterly irrelevant to trying to find out what happened to Robert, but he wants to get all these details in about robes. I grabbed my robe and I went downstairs. More movement through the house. And at that point, Joe was already applying pressure to the wound. I gave him another towel. And when I was coming downstairs, Dylan was in the doorway. And I went, and when I came, he backed up a bit and let me in. Again, kind of needless detail, all of this, apart from to say that Dylan wasn't around at the time and now Dylan is around. Dylan has appeared. And I gave Joe the towel. I was still on the phone with the operator and was saying, we need help right away. Urgency again. Joe was like, what time is it? It's taking so long. Urgency again. Was there no urgency? Is this need for repeated urgency being shown to show that to get across a lie that this was something that they needed to do right away, not something they had spent some time planning for? And I asked the operator what time it was. Now, if you've listened to the 911 call, you'll know this is one of the most bizarre points of the 911 call, where he suddenly says, what time is it? And the operator tells him what time it is. And she says it was 11:43, timestamp right there. And she had said that earlier. And then again, she said, I had to go to the door and let the ambulance and police come in. Now, do you notice that in the earlier part, before Robert screamed, he was very good at telling us times and how long things were taking. not very good at it. He was actually very vague at it, but he was doing a lot of mentions of time. Since Robert's been found, his storytelling way has changed, and he's not mentioning the time or how long durations anymore. Again, very much like Joe's story, the tendency's changed around the time of the screaming. So has Victor's. And I said I didn't know if anyone was still in the house. So I was. I went to the window and opened up the shutters because they were completely closed, and I looked down and I couldn't see anything or anybody. His story has drifted away from Robert. Could be he's squeamish, doesn't want to talk about it that more. Could be that he was on this 911 call and helping guide the ambulance in or something like that. But he's drifted away subtly from talking about Robert. And I, was talking to her and saying we need help now. Urgency. And then she said they're on their way, there'll be a minute. And then I saw the ambulance pull up. And then I looked down the street and I saw a fire engine. So in that section there, big focus in getting across to us how urgent all this stuff was. Now, the time is very significant, and I mean that in terms of the fact that he asked the operator the time. Time seems hugely significant to Victor, but he stopped telling us what time things happened at in this sort of crazy, it was 10 to, quarter to, it took 5 minutes. It wasn't a short call, it was all that has disappeared from his language there, but time is very significant. For him to mention time on the 911 call and again in this interview, that has got to be very significant. Let's have one last part from Victor, and what I want you to look for here is information he's offered without being asked about it. Obviously, in a police interview, you will answer the questions you're asked, but the information that we offer up that we weren't asked about, it must be important for us to say that for one reason or another. Let's have a listen to him in the police interview.
And I went downstairs and opened the door and let them in. And then the ambulance attendants went upstairs and Dylan came downstairs. We were both in shock, both like stark white and eyes as big as saucers, and
Was Dylan there when you got there?
downstairs.
Yes.
When I came down the second time, when I was on the phone, that's the first time I saw Dylan.
And was that on the second floor?
It was on the second floor.
Okay.
It was right by the doorway to the office.
All right. And what was he doing?
He was just standing there.
What was he dressed like?
He was in his robe.
Okay.
When I screamed, when we came down the stairs the first time and I screamed, I thought I heard the door chime.
Okay. You thought you heard the door chime at the time?
Yes.
But when you came down, you didn't see anybody.
I didn't see anybody.
Dylan wasn't there?
No. Down on the first floor, no.
Okay.
I was the only one down the first floor. Dylan and Joe were still in with Robert when I went down to let the ambulance in. And,
But it was before that you heard the door chime?
yes, it was much earlier. It was before I even called 911. It was when I was screaming.
And you didn't see Dylan at that time down
No.
there, right? You didn't see Dylan anywhere?
No.
Okay. But Joe was with you?
Joe was with me.
Okay, was Joe in the bedroom the whole time? With you before you heard the screams?
Yeah, as far as I know, yes.
But because you had dozed off?
I was asleep. I woke up to the screams, and I remember hearing the screams and startling up, and I could feel Joe doing the same thing.
Okay.
Just the strangest interview I've heard in this whole thing. I went downstairs, opened the door and let them in, and then the ambulance attendants went upstairs and Dylan came downstairs. We were both in shock, both with dark white and eyes as big as saucers. The importance of Dylan the placement of Dylan seems to be very important to him. The police guy says, was Dylan there when you got there? Downstairs, asks Victor. Now, sometimes a question to a question could just be buying thinking time, and that might be what's happening here, but also it could be to clarify what he means by that. Yes, says the detective. When I came down the second time, when I was still on the phone, that's the first time I saw Dylan. I think we've got some confusion about which the sighting of Dylan they're talking about. Was that on the second floor? It was on the second floor, okay. It was right by the doorway to the office. And what was he doing? He was just standing there. What was he dressed like? He was in his robes, something in them. When I screamed, When we came down the stairs the first time and I screamed, I thought I heard the door chime. Now, this is the extra bit. He wasn't asked about any of this. He's jumped right back in time again because he says this is, long before I called 911, or before I called 911, to be fair. And he jumps right back. Look, he screamed. When I screamed. He's saying he screamed. Remember Joe saying that Dylan didn't hear the chimes, but not mentioning the screams. Also, if you're screaming hysterically, which he said he was, can you hear a door chime over the screaming? Okay, you thought you heard the door chime that time? Yes. So this door chime, this second door chime that only Victor heard, is really important for him to get out there. He's almost like, oh, I haven't told that part of the story yet. I need to go back and add it in. But when you came down, you didn't see anybody. I didn't see anybody. Dylan wasn't there. No. Down on the first floor? No. Okay. I was the only one down on the first floor. Dylan and Joe were still in with Robert when I went down to let the ambulance in, and I just want you to remember that for the Dylan episode. Dylan and Joe were still in with Robert, very close to Robert when I went down to let the ambulance in. That is something that will come up in the Dylan interview when we look at that in the next episode. But it was before that you heard the door chime. Yes, it was much earlier. It was before I even called 911. It was when I was screaming. And you didn't see Dylan at that time down there, right? You didn't see Dylan anywhere. No. But Joe was with you. Joe was with me. And was Joe in the bedroom the whole time with you before you heard the screams? And the answer is very instructive here. Yeah, as far as I know, yes, says Victor. Now, he's told us that twice Joe went downstairs. Once to sort out the cable package and once to go and greet Robert when he came in. He doesn't seem to mention that here. He just seems to mention that as far as I know, which is not vouching, real strong vouch that Joe was next to me all the time. It's just, as far as I know, he was, yes. Because you dozed off, I was asleep, says Victor. I woke up to the screams. There were screams, not yelling, to Victor. And I remember hearing the screams and startling up, and I could feel Joe do the same thing. You'll see again, it's just him that he talks about. I woke up to the screams, and I remember hearing the screams, not we woke up to the screams. And then he says, I could feel Joe do the same thing. So again, it's all slightly different. So in that last section there, he wasn't asked about the chimes. He volunteered that information. He felt he had to get it out there. And he's very sure of where Joe was throughout this entire interview, where Joe was, what floor he was on, how long he was away for, until he isn't. As far as I know, he was next to me. So that is 12 minutes or so of Victor talking in this police interview. Very, very strange. Look, I think he's telling us a story here. He starts way back and he seems to be doing scene setting so often. He wants us to know about the urgency in calling 911. Did they call 911 as soon as they found the body? Or is this an attempt to persuade us, convince us how urgently they were acting, called 911? He repeats lots about hearing screaming. He wants us to know he heard screaming. The concepts of time, it's like he's building a timeline, like the timing is all very important to him. Cleaning and showers, all before they find Robert. That is very important for him to mention as well. And also these movements between the floor, all really interest me. So what do you think about Victor? And maybe also what do you think about how Victor's story goes with Joe's story that we already heard in episode 1. Let me know in the comments. Episode 4, I'm going to pull this all together. I have no firm theories right now. I've watched the videos, I've done my analysis, but I haven't pulled it all together. So your comments could shape the way the 4th episode goes. So let me know in the comments what you think about what you've heard from Victor, and maybe also how Victor and Joe's stories tie together or don't hang together as well. You might have to go back and watch some of them a few times just to see where they match and where they don't match. But do let me know in the comments. Right, we've heard from Joe, we've heard from Victor. Next, it's time to hear from Dylan. And Dylan's interview has got a completely different vibe from the other one.
One or more of you three established.
I don't believe that. I really can't believe that. If it's one of the other guys, I will be completely shocked.
That's episode 3, Dylan's police interview. It's one night, 3 stories. Can we get closer to what happened to Robert Wone? NeverAtruerWord.com is the website. There you will find a whole load more on this case, including the breakdown of the 911 call. Do subscribe to make sure you get all the episodes directly to you as soon as they are released. NeverAtruerWord.com. There you'll also find a whole load more videos or podcasts breaking down the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So episode 3 with Dylan is on the way soon from Never a Truer Word.